So a habit is simply a behavior that is practiced enough, so done enough times that it becomes automatic. So it's you engage in behaviors all day long,
Yep.
but the ones that you do enough, those become habits. And when they're a habit, they're done automatically, which means they're done without you having to think about it.
Hello and welcome to Health and Humanity with Dan Voss, a health podcast show centered around living healthier lifestyles and improving our human connection and relationships. I have with me today Robyn Conley Downs, who is a founder of the mission-driven media and education brand Real Food, Whole Life, creator of the Feel Good Effect mindset and method, and author of the upcoming book, The Feel Good Effect. Holding a master's degree in education with an emphasis in behavior change and 4 years of public policy and health change at the doctoral level, her work taps into cutting-edge science around mindset, strategy, and habits, and how people create and sustain lasting wellness. She combines this professional research and background with work as a certified yoga teacher, specializing in mindfulness and self-compassion to share science-based, life-tested, radically simple solutions to help people feel good. When not writing or speaking, Robyn can be found behind the mic of her Apple top-rated Feel Good Effect podcast, in the kitchen creating simple real food recipes, hiking, reading, or practicing yoga. Recently named one of the most influential women in wellness, she lives in Portland, Oregon with her husband, Andrew, and their daughter, Ellie. Robyn, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this is great. I'm really excited for our conversation. You know, before we started recording this, we were kind of talking about our individual messages and our audience. And I think the message that you're putting out there and what my audience is looking for kind of aligns really well. That's, you know, living really just like an overall well-rounded, healthier lifestyle. So I'm super excited to get into this conversation. I'm excited to talk about your upcoming book. But before we kind of get into the contents of that, why don't you just take us on the journey of how you got to where you are today? I know you have a very successful podcast. You have the upcoming book launch. But I think what you do best is the brand that you have, you know, that brand of living a better life, a healthier lifestyle through small changes. So maybe we can start there, just telling us a little bit more about your journey and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So absolutely, that is my motto: is small shifts, big change. That those small shifts that you make, those really basic healthy things, are what build your day, and then your week, and your month, and then your year and your life. And that those things are actionable, like you can learn them, they're skills you can build. So you're not a victim of your circumstances if right now the way you're living isn't the way you want to live. So I came to this, you know, as always, most people's life stories are long, but the high level is that I started out in the field of behavior change, so studying how people create and maintain habits. And studied that for a really long time. And then eventually decided to go to, I got my master's degree, and then was going for a PhD in public health and policy, because the behavior change piece is more about individual level, so what you do individually, and then public policy is more about the structure, the systems that help individuals create and maintain change. But around that time, I just kept adding things to my plate. So your listeners may relate to that. As I got older into my 30s, I just kept adding. So I would add school, and then I'd add a job, and then I actually had a second job, and then, got married and had a baby. And so at that moment in my life, I was working a 60-hour week corporate type job. It was at a nonprofit, but I'm running a research center there. I was in school full time, so at nights. And then I had an infant. And I had this moment, this like rock bottom moment, where I looked at my life and I thought, what happened? I was striving towards all these things and I was accomplishing them,
Mm-hmm.
but I was miserable. I was at the bottom of the list. I wasn't taking care of basic things. I wasn't sleeping well, wasn't eating well. I wasn't exercising. And that's not the life I wanted to have.
Mm-hmm.
So then I did the thing that everyone does, which is like throw myself into wellness like it was my job, like doing all the things, meal prepping for hours a day, like working out an hour. I worked out an hour a day on top of
Mm-hmm.
the other stuff. And the interesting thing is that that extreme approach got really good results. I felt good and my skin looked good and my body was toned up. And the only problem was I was miserable
Mm-hmm.
and exhausted and I couldn't maintain it.
Yeah.
So it basically like repeated my striving in my work life to wellness.
Yeah.
And at that point, I had the second kind of rock bottom moment where I was like, what am I doing? What is happening? Why can't I figure this out? Why is wellness so hard? And I decided to take what I knew from behavior change and from from policy, and then I actually added all in this time a mindfulness emphasis as well. Like, what if you took all these things and came up with a solution? So
Mm.
that's where it all came from, the feel good effect mindset and method that's in the book, what I talk about on the podcast, and what I've lived in my own life. And applying it in my life had these amazing effects, which is that I didn't have to flip my life upside down or become a different person, but
Mm.
the things that I was doing, I could maintain and sustain and had joy, like I had joy in my life. And
Yep.
so that's the story. And what I like, my mission is this idea, gentle over perfect, that
Mm.
you can be well without burning yourself out in the process.
Yeah. I think that's so powerful because, we look at, for most of us, when you hit rock bottom, or even if you're not at rock bottom and you're just in a point in life where you feel super stressed and super overwhelmed, and you might try to make a change. And for most of us, like you said, you did this, you try to just change everything at once. Like you just jump in and just like make a huge change. But obviously that's not sustainable. And it sounds like that was pretty similar to your experience, is that it's not sustainable for long-term success. It might work in the short term.
Mm-hmm.
But if you really want to set yourself up for success, I think it's about making smaller changes over time.
Absolutely. And we don't think about the sustainability part as much. It's not as sexy.
Right.
It's not as marketable. So there's, excuse me, there's plenty of people selling, quick fixes, things that work in 30 days,
Yep.
a little bit, but they're not, I'm sorry, they won't stick with you. Or you'll do it, but at the cost of like everything else in your life. And
Yep.
eventually you can't stick with it because why would you? So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's so true. So true. I know there's a few things that you really like to touch on. You have mindset is a big thing, habits and routine. So I'd like to kind of cover each of those more in depth.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with mindset. So how can somebody, redefine wellness? Somebody that thinks wellness might be one thing, but it's really not. How can they go about redefining that on their own terms and kind of resetting that mindset so that you can really set yourself up for longer term success?
Mm-hmm. Well, first, I like to kind of give a definition of mindset since it's one of those things that gets thrown around a lot.
Yep.
I came up with a definition just from the research, so I would be happy to walk you through that if that would be
Please.
helpful first. Okay.
Yep.
So, a lot of what I do is kind of grounded in psychology and neuroscience. So, from what's actually happening in your brain, mindset is thought patterns. It's very simple, really, but a lot of times we don't spend as much time thinking about our thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Metacognition isn't like on the average person's mind a lot of the time.
Mm.
So when you actually understand what's happening in the brain, here's how it goes. So you have an experience or information comes in all day long, right? And that triggers a thought pattern.
Mm-hmm.
So it exists in your brain. And that thought pattern will cause you to take an action, and that action will get you a result.
Hmm.
And so what we focus on, though, is the result and trying to get to or at least the action. We say like, I want to have a different behavior, I want to have a different result. And so we think, oh, well, I'll just, focus my intention on this result. Well, that's fine. But there's actually a little bit easier way to do that, which is to understand what your thought pattern is. The thing about what we know about brains, though, is that those thought patterns can be shifted. It's called neuroplasticity. So you can be set in one way of thinking. That doesn't mean that you can't shift it. So that's a really powerful thing to know, because when it puts you in the driver's seat, you aren't stuck. You might just have thought patterns that are not serving you.
Sure. Can that go down to like opinions as well? Like when you say thought patterns and we can shift that, can that come to like the opinion of a political matter or a movement or just a way of thought that we've had our whole lives? Is that same kind of thing?
Yeah.
Or?
Let me give you an example, because it is a
Please.
little bit like, what? It's a little nebulous. So let me
Yeah.
give you a specific example. So, for example, the information or experience that happens is that you miss a workout, which that happens all the time, right? You think, I'm going to work out tomorrow, and you don't work out. Then it's a very simple thing. You didn't do it. There's no like moral judgment there, but your brain does this thing where it has a thought pattern. So the thought pattern for that missed workout could have been, I missed a workout, I'm so lazy, I never stick with anything. Beating yourself up. And usually the action then is that you don't necessarily work out the next day either, because you're stuck in this pattern of judgment, self-judgment, beating yourself up. Or you could miss a workout and your thought pattern could be, hey, no big deal, I missed a workout, I'm going to get back to it the next day. So it was the same thing. It was the same information or action that happened originally, but the result, the action result, is different. And so you can see that it becomes this fork in the road where you can learn this new pattern of thought and get a different result. So the result of that beating yourself up, which most of us are familiar with in one way or another, is generally linked with not persisting, with quitting. Whereas that more compassionate, hey, no big deal, I'm going to get back to it the next day, is much more associated with someone who sticks with it long term. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of thought patterns. You could look at it kind of across the board, but with wellness, we have really specific thought patterns people typically engage with that are not helpful, and then ones that we can kind of flip it to.
Yeah, that makes sense. That is something that makes perfect sense when you're explaining that to me and to our listeners here. But it's something that we don't think about on a day-to-day basis, right? It's just like a subconscious thought. Like the example you used was, I missed a workout, and you can either beat yourself up about it, and then you fall into that pattern of not working out, because then the next day you're like, well, I'm lazy and I don't want to work out again.
Right.
Or you can be a little bit more graceful to yourself and say, you know what, I can get up tomorrow, and I can, tomorrow's a new day. I see that in so many different areas of life. That's just one example that you gave, but that is really something that's kind of happening throughout the entire day, right? Different things that happen, different information that comes in. And we have these subconscious thoughts, and it's incredible that we have that ability to shift that thought pattern.
Yeah, I think it gives you so much agency and freedom in your life. And when you pay attention to them, they're not subconscious, they're conscious thoughts. So it's not, it's interesting because a lot of people kind of get into the metaphysical, like manifesting conversation. And I'm not in that camp. I'm really in like the science camp, which is this is how your brain works. If you pay attention to it, you can shift it. So it's like some people will say choose a different thought, and I'm more along the lines of like not choose, but like shift, right? So that, and you're right, it happens thousands of times a day, and so we are automatically living our lives according to these patterns. And so when I hear people say I'm stuck, or I'm not getting where I want, or I'm not motivated, I'm like, no. Pay attention to what you're thinking and shift those thoughts, and then you will be on a totally different trajectory.
Yeah, that's impactful. Really impactful. what can we be doing? You said, this is how our mind works. And then we can just pay attention to those thought patterns a little bit more. So what can we be doing so that we are taking it from a subconscious thought to more of a conscious thought? Is it something as simple as, well, it's not really simple, but it sounds simple. Mindfulness, is it meditating more? What are some things that you like to do to foster that?
Yeah, so you've got it. Mindfulness is exactly where you start. Sorry, I recorded the audiobook last week of the book.
Yeah.
And now my voice is not functioning
No,
as I
you're
would like it
okay.
to.
No, you sound great.
The recording an audiobook is like a 20-hour of talking. So
That
it's intense.
sounds very intense.
It was. But so mindfulness is exactly right. I feel like sometimes people get intimidated though by the concept of mindfulness or meditation. And so
Mm-hmm.
I like to present it in very practical terms. In the book, I have a like a 4-part framework for the 4 P's of shifting your mindset, which is really just pause, pay attention, practice, and then have patience.
Mm.
So the first step is just like pausing long enough to know, oh, was that like what thought pattern did I just have? At the beginning, that's not going to seem natural, or it will feel like really weird, I think, for most people.
Sure.
Um, but just like a slight pause, an interruption in what you're doing to say, when that thing happened, what was my thought?
Mm.
That's mindfulness, FYI, for those of you who are not in the world of mindfulness. That alone
Yep.
is mindfulness. Um, and then to pay attention to what it was. Then if you didn't, or you were not happy with that thought, or it's not getting where you want to go, right? It's not getting, it doesn't even have to be judgment. It's just, did
Mm-hmm.
that get you the result that you wanted? If not, what's an alternative? And in the book, I do lay out sort of these 3 mindset types. I call it the striving mindset, which is we found through the research to be the most common mindset, like thought patterns that hold people back, and then some alternatives, which I call the feel good mindset, which are proven through the research as alternatives that help
Mm-hmm.
people persist and feel really good and have success.
Got it. I love that word pause. I think it's, by the way, I think the book that you have coming out, the topic of the book is, it's such a great time for it to come out this year. I know there's so many bad things that have come in 2020 so far, but I love that word pause because I think that's one good thing that has come out of everything that's happened over the last several months, is that it has given us an opportunity to pause, whether that be in life in general, whether that be in a career, whether that be in a relationship, or even just day-to-day activity. Me personally, I'm finding myself slowing things down a lot more, and just pausing. Like I notice even getting in and out of my car. I live in the city. I'm in Chicago, so it's very busy. And it just seems like it's always like go, go, go. And when I look back at life before this year, it was like I would get to the grocery store and I would just like hop out of my car and kind of quickly walk into the store and get my stuff and go back into my car and then drive to the next place. And it was just like constant movement. And
Right.
now I feel like I can finally just like pause and like I said, a little thing like getting out of the car, I'm like just a little bit slower about it, right? And I'm just like thinking through my thoughts a little bit more, and I'm thinking through before I have conversations with whoever it may be, friends, family members, significant other. Before I go into that conversation, just like have a little pre-check of like, what do I want to get out of this conversation? So I think that word pause is really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And what if we look back on this time, and not to minimize any of the suffering that's happening,
Right.
um, but what if we look back and think and see, oh, that that forced pause allowed us to see something that we didn't see before,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then to take action to change it. I mean,
Yep.
that's profoundly powerful.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. So what about some of the other things that are big in your world? I know you talk about habits. Let's go with habits for now. What can we be doing to form healthy habits, or maybe shift unhealthy habits?
Sure. So first, again, I always want to talk about definitions
Yes,
because
please. Yeah, please.
it's so important that we know what we're talking about. And
Yep.
in wellness, so often we don't know what things
No, I'm
mean.
happy you're checking
Yeah.
me in there. Yes, please
Yeah.
share your definition of habits.
Yeah. So a habit is simply a behavior that is practiced enough, so done enough times
Hmm.
that it becomes automatic. So it's you engage in behaviors all day long,
Yep.
but the ones that you do enough, those become habits. And when they're a habit, they're done automatically, which means they're done without you having to think about it.
Mm.
So think about that for a second. That can either be really helpful if it's a healthy behavior that you want to do. There's a lot of beauty in doing it without thinking about it. If it's a behavior that's not as healthy, a little bit more destructive,
Yep.
and that becomes automatic, then you're doing that on autopilot without thinking about it.
Hmm.
And as I said, it's this collection of habits that makes up your day, your week, your month, your life. And so we want to pause, make sure that the behaviors that are automatic are the ones we want.
Mm.
And if they're not, we can do something about that.
Yeah, that's so true. And for most people, you could probably spend a little bit of time thinking through your habits, right? Of like, what do I do? And it kind of goes back to the whole mindset and thought process.
Mm-hmm.
They definitely correlate. But it could be something, in terms of unhealthy habits, like the clock hits 5 o'clock and now you're like, okay, that's my signal to grab a drink, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or it could be a healthy thing where, you wake up and you form the habit of, like, for me, I'm now getting into the habit of walking first thing in the morning. I make my cup of coffee and then I just go out for like a 20-minute walk.
Yeah.
And that is something that actually came from these last several months where I've had the pause, right? The great pause of 2020 where I can like now take some time for myself and wake up. So that's just a personal example of a healthier habit.
Yeah.
So
Well, let's talk about that a little bit more.
please, yeah.
So about turning that into like a true habit, the
Yep.
things that you need. So 4 things. Um, I didn't make this. I added one part, but the rest is from, I don't know, 70 years of behavioral research. So we actually know a lot about habits. It's always interesting to me how much we know and then how little that information is like available to people. So
Sure.
that's one of my goals, is just to say like, hey, this, we know how to do this. Let's make it simple.
Yep.
So you need 4 things to turn a behavior into a habit. The first is, good news here, mindfulness. You just have to pay attention on purpose to what you're doing, so that if it is an automatic thing that you don't want to be doing, you can shift it. Or if it's something like a morning walk that you like,
Yep.
you can pay attention. So that's one. The second thing is it needs to be rewarding, reinforcing, or joyful in some way, which really flies in the face of a lot of what we're taught in Western culture, which is you need to be motivated, disciplined, and have willpower, right? It's not about joy and it's not about reward. It's about do it because you are a motivated person. Well,
Yep.
that's not how the brain works. Spoiler alert. And so this is cool because if you can infuse some joy, reinforcement, or reward into that behavior,
Yep.
you are so much more likely to do it. So let's talk about your morning walk. What is it about that walk? I'm assuming because you said you've been doing it.
Yeah.
More. What
Yep.
is it about it that's like good? And it can be really specific or mundane.
Yeah. Oh no, I have lots of specific things
Yeah.
here. So one element I just mentioned, I have my cup of coffee. So that's an obvious good thing for me. I love coffee. I know some people suggest, like in the health world, they suggest not having a cup of coffee like right when you get out of bed. Maybe wait like an hour. It has better effects, the caffeine. But for me, I'm the type of person that needs coffee right away. So anyhow, that's the first thing that I love, is that I can walk and enjoy a delicious cup of coffee. But specifically with the walk, I love that it gives me movement, right? So I'm getting blood flow going first thing in the morning. I am outside in nature, even though I live in a big city. I have a few parks nearby, so I can be around trees and greenery. So I think that has some really good psychological benefits. I'm also getting fresh air, right? So I'm not cooped up in my tiny apartment. I can actually get out and get some fresh air. I'm also getting sunlight first thing in the morning, which is super important for your circadian rhythm to wake yourself up and have that natural light exposure. There's also the social benefit. I'm seeing other people, I'm seeing neighbors, I'm seeing other people walking around with their dogs. So even though in this world where we're walking around with masks and social distancing, like, it is still nice to see other people,
Mm-hmm.
even if we're not super close and talking as much as we would before. It's still that social aspect. So those are kind of just some of the big ones. There's also just, like, for me, going back to mindset, right? Just like getting my mindset right for the day. So
Mm-hmm.
what I specifically do is I focus on gratitude, and this is all internal, right? Just internal thoughts. As I'm walking, I'm thinking about what I'm grateful for, whether it's family, my career, my girlfriend, just having food for the day, having clean water, like whatever it is that I'm really grateful for. I just spend a few minutes thinking about gratitude.
Mm.
And then I also like to just think about, like, a plan for the day. Like, what are some big things that I must get done for the day? One, even if it's just one thing. So I think that for me, it's just been a really great, like I said, it's just 20-minute walk, but it's just a really great thing for me to kind of incorporate so many different healthy habits all in one.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's so awesome. And having all of those rewards or joy or what reinforcement, that is a key to turning that behavior into a habit. So if you're trying to
Yep.
do something like, let's say you're trying to adopt a workout um, behavior into a habit, but you don't like it and it's not fun and
Mm-hmm.
it's dark. Like you want that light, but it's dark, and you love music, but there's no music, and you need human contact, but you're alone. Like, you can try to force yourself into it, but
Mm-hmm.
figuring out all those things that are joyful for you it's not just like more fun, but will also make this behavior into a habit. So then there's two other parts. Hold on, I thought I had my phone off, but I don't.
You're good.
The other two remaining parts are repeating it or just repeating it. So the more times you repeat it, the more likely it is to become automatic. And I always
Yep.
like to say, consistency is not the same thing as perfection. So you don't have to never miss a day, and that is another mindset trap that people fall into, which is, I have to do it every single day. And we have these watches that reinforce that, and we have apps that reinforce that. But the bottom line is, you can miss a day
Yep.
and still turn a behavior into a habit. You just need
Yeah.
to do it more days than you don't. Very simple. And then the last thing is context or environment. So the way that your environment is set up will either help you turn a habit behavior into a habit or make it harder. So
Mm.
sometimes you want to make it harder, right?
Yep.
If you don't want it to become a habit. But for your daily walk, simple examples are, if you have your shoes and socks like out ready to go, or
Yep.
you have your headphones out ready to go. We think those things don't matter, but interestingly, they matter a lot. So if you want to do stretching at night while you're watching TV, put your yoga mat out in front of your TV. If you want to eat more
Mm-hmm.
fruits and vegetables, put them at the eye height in your refrigerator. Those things do matter and will help. So when you combine those four things, like mindfulness, paying attention on purpose,
Yep.
um, reward, joy, repetition without perfection, and that modifying your environment, you will be on the fast track to turning any behavior into a habit.
I really love the modifying your environment piece, because it's such a simple thing to do, but it really works. Like, if
Yeah.
you actually, like you said, for a workout, like, let's say you want to work out first thing in the morning, if you can just place your workout clothes at the edge of your bed,
Mm-hmm.
you're making it that much easier to get into your workout clothes first thing in the morning and then go to the gym or go work out,
Yeah.
at home. It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, and our brains are so good at conserving energy. I mean, humans evolved so that any energy conserved would be survival, right?
Yep.
But now it's very effective and probably less effective than we don't need it to be quite that effective. Even something like having your yoga mat like in a different room in the back of the closet is enough. If you're on the fence about whether to stretch, having to go in another room and get it out of the closet is literally enough to make you not do it. So
Yeah.
take advantage of that knowledge, and like you said, put it out there the night, put your outfit out the night before,
Yep.
And it's just one less barrier, that friction, a lot of people call it
Right.
friction, that keeps you from being consistent with those behaviors.
Yep. Exactly. What about routines? Is a routine the same as a habit? How would you define a routine?
So a routine is just a collection of habits that you
Okay.
do in the same order.
Yep.
So what we know about habit formation is that you starting with one is really the best thing in terms of success, but then you
Mm-hmm.
can chain them. So you just stack, or habit stacking, some people call it habit stacking.
Mm-hmm.
So a morning routine might start with you just actually described like a whole morning routine where you were chaining like
True.
a walk with a gratitude practice with
Yep.
a prioritizing your day. That is a perfect example
Yeah.
of a routine that has a collection of habits that you
Okay.
have chained together.
Very cool. Do you have, if you don't mind me asking, or to the extent of what you're willing to share, do you have a morning routine or an evening routine that you'd like to share?
I do. I actually have what I call it the 4R framework. I don't know why everything has to be alliteration, but
No, I
that's how
like
my
it.
brain works, apparently.
I like that because I'm actually a big fan of alliteration. The name of my podcast is Health and Humanity. I just
Yeah.
love alliteration. So
Good. Well,
yeah.
there we go. We have got that in common. So
Yep.
I found in my own life that the hour morning routine did not resonate. I had my daughter's 8 now. So when she was an infant, that made no sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then even now, I'm so glad that I have an alternative, because with her home all the time now, it just doesn't work to try to
Sure.
have that like 1 hour. So instead of a morning routine, I have what I call the 4R framework. So that's mini wellness routines throughout your day: early morning, mid afternoon, evening. So I call that, I always get them mixed up when I have to say them on the fly, but um, something like revive, reset, restore, and rest.
Yep.
And so I have a worksheet on my site. That's realfoodwholelife.com/resources. It's a free worksheet that has the 4Rs, and you can kind of plan your mini routines and like a menu of habits that you can choose
Cool.
from. But what I find is that so many people feel this pressure to have a elaborate morning routine,
Mm-hmm.
and instead of that, you could give yourself permission to do something shorter, but then sprinkle it throughout the day. So I find that my energy usually flags around 10:30, 11,
Mm-hmm.
and then around 3 or 4. And so I added those routines in. And so they're much shorter than a typical like morning routine for some people. But I will create I'll start with just one habit. If someone's new to this, I would say like just start with trying to adopt one habit
Yep.
and then chain a few together that creates that little mini routine. You can be flexible about timing, but I find also for me, I don't know about you, Dan, but I'm a person that tends to push through and not give myself breaks. And
Mm-hmm.
it's a reminder that wellness is a priority and that I'm worthy of taking care of myself. And
Yeah.
that, again, that those little shifts create big change. Without taking a full hour, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 4 times a day is 40 minutes or somewhere in there. That over time is such a big deal. So that's like how I do it. And it kind of depends on the day, the habits that go into those routines, but they're
Mm-hmm.
very basic. And I think people are always surprised. Like it's nothing flashy. It's just the
Right.
basic stuff that like really makes me feel good.
Yeah. Totally. I personally have a note in my phone. It's just check boxes. There's like 5 or 6 habits that make up the morning routine. The
Mm-hmm.
walk is one of them. So for me, I guess that would be the initial habit, is to wake up and just go to my note in my phone and then
Yeah.
see each one of those routines, which makes up see each one of those habits that makes up the routine, and then just
Right.
start checking them off. So that's just something personally that I enjoy. What about, and again, this ties back into mindset. Like, how does a routine set us up for the day? Like for me, I find that when I do my morning routine, I'm just set up better for the day. I have more clarity. I have more energy. I'm more present.
Mm-hmm.
And then even for a nighttime routine, like I don't follow that as much as I do my morning routine, but there are some things for the evening that I like to do just to set myself up for proper sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess if you have anything like on the neuroscience of that, like what is it that a routine does for us to really set us up for success, whether it's for the day or for nighttime for proper sleep?
Yeah. Well, it's this what we've talked about already. It's one, you've created behaviors that are automatic, and so you're
Mm-hmm.
not using your mental resources. So when you're depleted, you can still do them. So one of the things I teach, and that's also in the book, is what I call the fatigue formula. So the
Mm-hmm.
fatigue formula is decisions made throughout the day and the amount of times you've multitasked that drains your mental energy, or what we usually call it willpower. So
Yep.
the more you drain that battery, that willpower battery, then you find yourself at 4 o'clock when you had been like resisting the snacks and the sugar and the crunchy, fatty, salty things. All of a sudden, you have no willpower and you're like shoving it all in your face. I'm not saying this
Yeah.
from personal experience. I'm just saying in general, people might have know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
And there's nothing wrong with those kinds of things to have yummy snacks. But I find for myself, there's a difference between like choosing to have something really yummy versus just mindlessly doing it because I'm exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have those routines, the habits stacked into your routines, and they're automatic, you don't need that willpower and you don't need that energy. So even on days when you're exhausted, you do it anyway. And it really restores that battery a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I'm happy you brought up the idea of willpower. It reminds me of you may be aware of how Steve Jobs would wear the same black turtleneck and blue
Mm-hmm.
jeans every day.
Mm-hmm.
I think Mark Zuckerberg does the same thing. It's like the
Yep.
same. I don't know if he still does it, but he was doing for a while, like the same white T-shirt or whatever color he picked. And the idea there is that when you're getting ready in the morning, instead of having one more decision to make throughout the day, because we do
Mm-hmm.
have so many decisions that we make throughout the day, and then over time that depletes our willpower. Their idea was, let's just eliminate that one decision that I don't have to make anymore by just wearing the same black T-shirt or whatever it is each day.
Yeah, so that's just, it's called decision fatigue. It's
Mm-hmm.
a very real thing. And even, for example, in the day, in one day, most people on average make up to around, this is an average, like 267 decisions just about food.
Whoa.
And you don't think about that, but when you dive into it and you think about just the decisions you make around dinner,
Yep.
what am I going to have? What time am I going to start making dinner? Am I going to use this ingredient or that? Do I need a recipe? Should I look on the website? Once I get there, which category I'm looking at? It goes into this sort of spiral, and it's all happening so fast you don't notice it.
Yeah.
But 267 decisions just about food.
That's
And then when
crazy.
you add in work and family and responsibilities and all these things, you're making thousands of decisions. And we know for sure that that decision fatigue really, really depletes willpower. And
Mm.
so, as you mentioned, like one of the ways to combat that in my book, I call it a decision diet, which is making decisions ahead of time. So the capsule wardrobe, or the one outfit for men, I feel like it's one outfit. For women, not to
Yeah.
to over stereotype genders, but like for
Sure.
some people maybe it's one outfit, or for some people it's that idea of a capsule wardrobe. But
Yep.
any way that you can reduce decisions or make them ahead of time when you have the energy, you're going to
Mm.
feel more energetic and focused, and not need willpower, not need to rely on willpower later on.
Yeah. For me, I am really good at this, like big, it's really odd. I'm making big decisions pretty easily, like whether it's for my business or just big life decisions,
Mm-hmm.
which is probably not the best thing because like it's sometimes riskier decisions, but I'm like, no problem, let's just do that, go with it. And then
Right.
when it comes to small decisions, like what do I want to make for dinner, or especially if I'm in a group setting and we're trying to figure out where to go, where to go to eat, I freeze up. Like I don't know. It's just like information overload. I'm like, I want them. I want both. I want to go to both places. It's just
Right.
crazy that I can make the bigger decisions really easily, and then the small decisions are really tough for me. What else in terms of living an overall healthier lifestyle can we be doing? I know you talk about those small changes. I think what I'm getting at right now is like for somebody that's burnt out or has so much stress and they feel like they just need to make all kinds of changes.
Mm-hmm.
But as you mentioned before, like you just kind of took it one thing at a time and then you add on over life. What else besides what we've talked about so far can we be focusing on, whether that's nutrition, exercise? I know you've been into yoga
Mm-hmm.
a large portion of your life. What are some other like small changes that you like to focus on?
Yeah, I think if you're feeling like that, first of all, just know that you're not doing anything wrong. You're not a
Mm,
failure. Um, I think so often and this looks different for different people, but that inner critic is really loud, and especially around wellness. And then you throw body image in there and all these things, and it's easy to sort of start spiraling. And so
yep.
I know that it's really tempting to start with a diet. I mean, that's like number one thing, at least Americans do, is like, let me go on
Hmm.
this specific kind of diet. And I also, my website is called Real Food Whole Life. I have 500 recipes on the site. So I totally understand that. And that was me, my first response, like, I'm going to change how I eat.
Yeah.
I'm a big proponent of real food and healthy food and how that fuels your life. And I do think that matters.
Yeah.
But
I agree.
I think to start is a little bit on this inner work and a little bit on mindset. And
Yep.
especially if you keep if the stop and start cycle is happening to you, then you know that this is like where you need to start. So with the striving mindset, as I mentioned before, in is also in the book, and I talk about it a lot. This is from about 20 years of research that we found that, particularly to your question, Dan, like
Hmm.
where do you start? And this doesn't feel as exciting as going out and buying $500 of like really special groceries
Right.
or
Right.
throwing out all your food. And you can do that if you want to. But I would say also add this in, which is the striving mindset is perfectionism, all or nothing thinking, and comparison. And perfectionism looks different for different people. We find it like typically looks different for men than it does for women, but it's the
Yep.
same issue. And then the antidote to the striving mindset is the feel good mindset, which is self compassion, what I call the power middle, but is really flexible thinking and gratitude.
Mm.
And so, a small mindfulness practice where you incorporate all three or just one, like they kind of pair up. So, if you have a bigger issue with one, you could focus on just one. But a small mindset practice where you start learning self compassion, gratitude, and flexible thinking will help you access and succeed and have momentum with all of these other things.
Yeah.
And then maybe adding one small habit of even something like adding more vegetables, depending on how much you're struggling. You
Hmm.
know, if you're trying to up level, then it would be one thing. If you're just truly starting from scratch, it would be another.
Yep.
But, you know, maybe a small habit in each of the categories of like food, sleep, and um, movement would be a good place to start.
Yeah. I'm such a firm believer in small changes in all of those areas. Specifically, I mean, like you said, it kind of depends on where you're at with your journey of, let's say, transformation. But really, regardless of where you're at, for nutrition, for example, like you can just make small changes over
Yeah.
time.
Mm-hmm.
And same with sleep. Like when I started really researching how important sleep is
Mm-hmm.
and started researching what can I be doing to get better sleep, there's quite a few things. Like if you don't know any of them, when you see it all right there on the table, you're like, whoa, that's a lot. I'm gonna
Right.
try to do that overnight, like literally. So for me, I think it was really important to say, okay, maybe just sleep in a cooler environment. Let's start off there, right? Like if it's wintertime, just crack the window open a little bit. Like just get yourself into a cooler environment, and then from there I can go into having a darker room, right? I get the blackout shades or have an eye mask, which I like to wear now. There's just all these little things that you can kind of add on over time instead of just making it, one big change literally overnight. So
Right.
I
Yeah.
think that's a super important thing. I want to touch on a little bit more on those three things you just mentioned. Perfectionism. What were the other two that you had talked about?
Perfectionism, all or nothing thinking, and comparison are the striving
Okay,
mindset. Mm-hmm.
very good. So let's start with perfectionism. somebody like myself, I tend to be perfectionist, but let's just talk to somebody that is a perfectionist. Because I think it's super easy to just get into a mindset, a rut of like, it's got to be this way. And if it's not, I'm going to beat myself up about it.
Right.
Does that kind of come down to spending a little bit more time, like thinking about what you want out of that situation? Does it come down to self-confidence, not beating yourself up about things? Where can somebody kind of analyze that idea of perfectionism?
Yeah. Well, first, it's not a personality type, or at least not how I talk about it. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people think of perfectionist and they think of like someone with immaculate house or a perfectly clean car. And in reality, a lot of perfectionists have filthy cars because why would you clean it if you can't do it perfectly? So there's definitely the camp of perfectionists
Interesting.
that get everything controlled, and then there's some that don't do anything because
Hmm.
they can't do it exactly right. So they don't start things, they don't take the risk, they don't do the creative, vulnerable thing because they can't get it right.
Yep.
Perfectionism, again, it's those, right back to Dan, the beginning of our conversation, those thought patterns. So
Mm-hmm.
perfectionist thought patterns are just a response to um, a situation that you're in that gets you to the action and the result. So
Mm.
perfectionist thought pattern is really about mistake avoidance. So that's really damaging though, right? Because if you're going through your whole life not trying to not make mistakes, what does that have? What result does that have?
Yeah, that's tough. That's really tough.
You don't start it. So a lot of people, a perfectionist thought pattern a lot of times sounds like, I don't have all the pieces of the puzzle, or
Mm-hmm.
I don't know all the steps, or I don't know how to do this right. If this is a big block for you, for me it is. This is my most central. We actually have archetypes, and so people usually like have a dominant archetype. It sounds like maybe you are a dominant in the perfectionist thought pattern.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. And we even know in the brain that people with perfectionist thought patterns, making a mistake feels like an electric shock.
Mm.
It actually has pain associated. And so you start going through life looking to avoid that pain,
Yep.
which makes you procrastinate.
Yep.
People who have perfectionist thought patterns will procrastinate more than anyone else. Um, they make you closed off, less likely to take risks, less likely to be creative. So
Mm.
in wellness, less likely to start the food plan, because when you make a mistake, you think, well, I screwed this up, I'm
Yep.
off the wagon, right? I'm sorry. So sorry about that.
No, you're
So
okay.
the antidote to perfectionist thought patterns is self-compassion,
Mm.
which is meeting yourself with kindness, which feels really uncomfortable to anyone who's a type A person who thinks perfectionist thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it's just meeting your inner critic with the same kindness you would show to a loved one.
Mm.
So when you hear those thoughts, when you recognize that pattern, you shift it by meeting it with kindness. And that feels really awkward. I certainly think for women and for men, even perhaps more in the research, they've found that just isn't aligned with a lot of what we think of masculinity in the West. But I'm like, hey, you don't have to do this, but FYI, it's like, you'll be more productive, you will be more successful, you'll have more happiness in your life. So you take it or leave
Yeah.
it.
Yep.
Um, and what we know too is that with time, as I mentioned, it shifts to where this becomes your automatic response.
Mm.
When you make a mistake, instead of that shock, you're able to say, you messed up, you're human, no big deal.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's my
I
big tip there.
I love that. I'm getting into this so much as you're talking right now because everything you just mentioned pretty much speaks to me personally. And I'm kind of just realizing this as you're talking it out, how much of a perfectionist I am in terms of pleasing everybody and not making mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And when you said that piece about, when a perfectionist makes a mistake and it's the equivalent of, jog my memory
An
here.
electric shock.
Yes, an electric shock.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that. Like,
Yeah.
I actually can relate to that when I make a mistake, especially if it's damaging to somebody else or somebody
Mm-hmm.
else's business or a job that I was supposed to get done and I failed. I like that hits hard on me. And then you talked about the idea of self-compassion, and I'm realizing that's something I need to work on more. And I'm sure for a lot of people is just spending more time loving ourselves
Mm-hmm.
and accepting ourselves and realizing that it's okay to make a mistake.
Yeah.
Because that's how we're gonna bounce back and improve.
Yes. And self-compassion, there's a lot of myths and misunderstanding about self-compassion. So
Mm,
self-compassion does not make you weak. It doesn't make you selfish. It doesn't
yep.
make you like spiritual bypass, which is to ignore the problems of the world or your own feelings.
Mm-hmm.
It's key to growth. So if you
Yep.
want to do those hard, challenging things and you want to do them for a long term, then you need self-compassion.
Mm,
Self-compassion is medicine, and it's powerful medicine, and it's been
mm-hmm.
proven in the research. So Dan, when I found that research about the electric shock, that hit me right in the heart
Yep.
because I can physically feel it in my body. And I didn't realize how much other people actually had that same experience. But
Yeah.
when I looked at what was keeping me from wellness, so much of it was mistake avoidance and feeling like I wasn't doing it right.
Yep.
So self compassion is simply about mindfulness, about kindness,
Mm,
and then about common humanity. So understanding that literally to be human means to make mistakes. And
yep.
you are in it. We are, as we all heard this a lot lately, we're all in it together.
Right.
But we all experience this. So just one quick example. I know we're coming kind of to the end, but and I'll want to share the other two that we didn't
Please.
get to.
Yes.
But I just sent out an email today, and it was announcing all these really awesome bonuses for buying the book ahead of time, which I
Yep.
love to share with your audience as
Mm-hmm.
well. But I sent this email out, and I spent a lot of time on it, and I proofread it, and I work for myself, so I didn't have anyone else look at it. I send it out, and immediately I get back emails that are saying the link doesn't work in
Mm,
part of the email, and like from a lot, I have thousands of people on my list, so I got a lot of
right.
emails, and
Oh,
immediately I feel that like just
yeah.
like pain of I messed up and this is so embarrassing and blah 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 blah. And then but this is the cool thing. It's not that I don't have that thought. It's just that I immediately can shift to that other pattern, which is like you made a mistake. You like
Yep.
and I said to myself, what would I say if this was my husband or my daughter? I'd say, hey,
Mm,
you work for yourself. It's a pandemic. You have no
yeah.
childcare. You are doing the freaking best you can, and you're doing a good
Yep.
job. And like people may have not said it that nicely, but they don't really care. And if they do, then like maybe they're not the right person for you anyway.
Right.
And so it's really been damn like this life altering thing for me. And without self compassion, I wouldn't be able to do the podcast. I wouldn't have written the book. I wouldn't be sending these emails out and making
Yep.
mistakes and
Yep.
getting over it and sending more emails. So
Yep.
I would say adding that to your mindfulness practice, to your walk, like,
Yeah.
and a really simple trick there is just what would you say? We are much better at showing compassion to our inner circle of loved ones, including
Mm,
pets, than we are
yep.
to ourselves.
Yep.
So if you can't access it, just say like, what would you say? What would you say to your girlfriend? And then
Yeah.
feel that, feel what you'd say to her to yourself and feel that in your body.
Yeah. I love that mindset of relating it to what would you say to a loved one, a friend, because you're not going to yell at them or get down on them. I mean, you
Right.
might depending on the situation, but you might be doing it in a more compassionate way. So why would it be any different compared to how we treat ourselves?
Right.
Um, can I share something real quick? Because I know
Yeah.
you wanted to get to those other 2 points. Um, it reminded me when you were talking about your email that went out and the link didn't work. There's something I've shared this on a previous interview in my podcast, and it's something I'm trying to get better at and trying to implement into my life more and really focus on it more. You may have heard of it. It's called the 5x5 rule. And if something happens to you that's upsetting, if it's not going to matter 5 years from now, then don't spend more than 5 minutes in the moment being upset about it.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And I know I preach that to some people, and I don't always live by it, but I think it's a super impactful and powerful habit, right?
Yeah, and that starts to shift your thinking over time, because
Yep.
even if that doesn't come naturally, like you said, you're still working on it, doesn't mean that over time that won't become more automatic for you, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, exactly. So let's get to the second one you said is, well, you go ahead and mention it because I
So
already forgot
all or nothing
it.
thinking,
Yes.
which is similar. I mean, these are all similar, and we all
Yep.
have them. Like I said, usually people are kind of dominant in one. All or nothing thinking is very much like dichotomous black and white thinking, all
Mm-hmm.
in, all out,
Yep.
on the wagon, off the wagon. So if you're someone that like skips from diets, like you're doing keto and now you're doing the Whole30 and now you're whatever's after keto, I'm sure there's something that I'm not aware of at this that's coming up right
Sure.
now. Or that
Paleo and vegan
right.
and all the
And
others.
then you're doing a marathon, but then now you're doing Peloton and
Yep.
you love trends, but to you they're not trends, they're like a way of life until they're not a way of life. So
Mm.
this is really, really enforced in the wellness world, and it is really, really damaging.
Mm.
Um, really damaging for body acceptance, really damaging for having a healthy diet over time. And the way through that is with what I call the power metal or flexible thinking, which is really just about saying, when you feel stuck or you feel that like I'm off the wagon feeling, asking,
Yep.
are there more than two options? And usually there are.
Mm.
Like usually there are more than two options. And so it's undoing that false dichotomy that there are only two options.
So what would those two options be? So like, let's say I can give you a personal example actually. Um, Recently, I would say in the last like 2 months, my two brothers and myself, we were going to do this specific workout regimen where each day it's mostly body weight exercises, push-ups, pull-ups, different kind of ab workouts. And it's just about every single day. It's a 6-week program. And I would say like halfway through, like 3 weeks into it, I was doing pretty good. And then like halfway through, I just like missed a couple of days in a row.
Yes.
And then my first thought was, well, I missed a few days and now I'm kind of done.
Yes.
I lost the motivation. I just don't feel like doing it anymore. So in that scenario, what would the two first options be? Number one would be, no, I got to push through and go all in.
Right.
The other option would be, no, I'm out. I'm done with it. Right.
Yeah. So
Those
most
are the two.
people like they do, and I make just taking a wild guess, but maybe it was like 13 days in. That's
Mm-hmm.
the research is like super
Sounds
clear
about
that
right.
people make it 13 days or 14 days.
Yeah,
Thanks
that
for
sounds
that.
about right.
And these places know that the places selling the 6-week program, they know that you're going to make it that far and then stop.
Yep.
So, and the dichotomous thinking or this all or nothing thinking will tell you like once you miss 2 days, then you've screwed it all up and you're out. So
Yep.
what I try to get people to do is say, okay, you missed a day. I call it the 2 out of 3 rule. So you missed one day, can you get the next two?
Mm.
And that's success. Even though your program is telling you that that's not success, you can
Right.
define that for yourself.
Yeah.
Even more than that, like let's say you just say like, hey, my version of success is to do this program 1 day a week. You get to decide that. And I know it's hard. I'd so much rather have you, if you liked that program,
Yep.
I'd much rather have you do it 1 day a week and have it take you 6 months than
Yeah.
stop doing it altogether.
Okay. I
Yeah.
like that. That's
Yeah.
super, super helpful because you're right. That's where I fell into it. It was the all or nothing. It was
Right.
either I'm going to do this all out and go every single day, or shoot, I missed 2 days and now I'm out.
Right. And small shifts,
So,
big change. Like you could totally prove your brothers are either they keep going, let's say they do it and then they
yep.
finish the 6 weeks and they're done. Let's say you
Mm-hmm.
just do it 2 days a week and it takes
Yeah.
you three, or I can't totally do the math on that right now, but let's say it takes you 3 or 4 times as long as that 6-week program, but you're still doing it in 6 months
Right.
from now.
Yep.
Like whose success is just the real success there. So you get
That's
to
brilliant.
decide that, even if your program wasn't designed that way.
Yep. Brilliant. I love it. Cool. And then the third one you have there is
So the third one's comparison, which everyone is
comparison.
familiar with. We've all
Right.
been there. I like to point out to people that sometimes the comparison that's holding you back is spending too much time with friends or online, so social media,
Yep.
and their version doesn't look like yours, and you think you're doing it wrong, so you stop.
Mm.
A second version of comparison is of comparing yourself to a version of yourself in the past. So maybe before the relationship you're in, maybe before becoming a parent, maybe before COVID, and that version was better than this version, and so it stops you from doing things.
Hmm.
And
That's super interesting.
yeah, it's so often that these are the three reasons that people stop doing wellness. And
Yep.
the way through comparison is gratitude, which you mentioned you
Mm.
already have a gratitude practice.
Yep.
So gratitude is really absorbing the good about your circumstance. Doesn't mean ignoring the bad. It just means that it's called negativity bias. We over focus and hold on to negative experiences, and um, we don't hold on to and acknowledge the good experiences. So our
Yep.
perception is faulty because it's overly negative. So with gratitude, it helps you identify the good and hold on to it,
Mm-hmm.
which makes comparison way less powerful because you acknowledge like this version of me, it's not like anyone else, and that's good. Like
Yeah.
this version is great, and then you can continue to move forward toward your goals.
I think that's super power. I think gratitude is so powerful just in general. There's science that shows you can't be grateful and angry at the same time, or you can't be grateful and fearful at the exact same time.
Or at least it interrupts. I always like to just clarify that, like, it interrupts
Yeah.
the thought pattern. So
Interrupts.
you can actually
Correct.
feel a lot of things at the same time,
Yep.
but it interrupts the thought pattern and allows another for a different thought pattern.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. That's a good point because you can have the two thoughts, but it at
Right.
least
Sometimes people
interrupts it.
beat themselves up for like having a lot of feelings at the same time, but I think what gratitude's been shown to do is interrupt and then allow you that other alternate thought
Yep.
pattern.
Yep. I think in today's world with social media, it's so easy to compare ourselves to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Look at them going on this trip, or them in this relationship, or they're at this restaurant. Um, what is something we can do? Is it just? I mean, I guess a simple thing would be just to turn off your phone for a little while if you're feeling that, like feeling down about comparison.
Yeah, and then turn it off, but then have that gratitude practice so that you start to combat that negativity bias,
Yep.
so that you are aware of all the good in your life, even if your life is really hard and challenging, because
Mm,
you're missing it. You're missing it, and that is making the comparison more toxic.
yeah. Specifically with gratitude, and I guess it is comparison as well, but it's like kind of the opposite way. Like usually when people think of comparison, they compare themselves to somebody else that has all these good things in their life. But for me, and I don't know if this is the best practice, but at least it makes me feel a little bit better when I'm like down about a certain situation and I'm complaining, or even if it's a legit thing that I'm really upset about, or just down in the dumps about. I usually try to reframe my mind to think about whatever it is that is tough, whatever adversity I'm facing. Somebody out there has it worse than me. Even if it feels like I have the worst day or the worst week, there's somebody else that's going through a tougher time. So that is kind of both there. I'm like grateful for like, okay, well, at least I have this. And unfortunately, somebody else is struggling through this situation worse than I am. So
Mm-hmm.
again, I don't know if that's the best mindset about it all. I don't know if it's the healthiest, but at least it helps me to get through certain situations.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, this was so good. Before I get to my last question for you, I know you've mentioned some of your resources. You have your website. Where would you like to send people to learn more about yourself?
Yeah, so you can listen to the Feel Good Effect podcast. You can search that right now on any app and subscribe. We have fresh new episodes every week about mindset, um, routines, and habits, just as we've talked about today. We have great guests every week, and I do solo episodes. So that's a great way right away if you're a podcast listener. I'm on Instagram at Real Food Whole Life. I always chat with people in my comments. So I love kind of hearing where you came from and what you're up to. And then Real Food Whole Life is the central place. You can go to realfoodwholelife.com/book to pre-order the book anywhere books are sold. The cool thing is on that page, you can also enter your receipt once you've pre-ordered the book. And I have this incredible bonus bundle. It's like this giant, amazing gift for you if you help spread the word by ordering ahead of time. And it has like a healthy habits hack guide, which we talked with tips that we talked about today. It has a mantra journal. It has like really cool wallpapers for your phone that are from the book.
Cool.
It just has a ton of really great stuff. So if you are thinking about the book, I would recommend doing it ahead of time because that will give you a cool bonus.
Awesome. And the launch date is in September, correct?
September 1st. So very
September
much
1st.
faster than I was,
Yeah.
it's coming up here. It seemed very far away for a long time, but here we're coming closer
That's
to it.
so exciting. So if you want to get all those additional resources and benefits, you can pre-order before September 1st.
Yep.
And I'll be sure to have all of that linked up in the show notes and the description.
Awesome. Thanks.
Very good, of course. And before I let you go here, who do you want to impact the most with your work?
I want to impact every human who feels like they have tried and failed, like they are like wellness isn't for them, like the pursuit of wellness has left them unwell. I want people to know that wellness is for you and you can do it in your way on your own terms in a simple, gentle way. Yeah.
I love that. So cool. Robyn, thank you so much for your time and coming on the show and sharing your message. I know my listeners will get a lot out of it. So thank you for taking the time.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. You have a great day.
You too.